Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of Canada. So, how does a massive piece of land, home to ancient cultures and fought over by empires, actually become the modern country we know today? From its first peoples to its really complex modern identity, we're going to connect all the dots for you. Let's jump in. Back in the 18th century, the famous philosopher Voltaire completely dismissed Canada. He called it nothing more than a few acres of snow. Yeah. He literally thought France was better off keeping a tiny sugar island in the Caribbean. But was he right? Was it just a frozen wasteland? Or was he missing one of the most incredible stories of nation building in history? Well, let's find out. We're going to trace this whole story through 6 key chapters. I want you to think of it kind of like an hourglass. The story starts out really broad, then it narrows down to one single, crucial moment when Canada was created, and then it expands right back out again. We'll kick things off with the continent's first inhabitants and those European newcomers. Then we'll see how empires clashed for control, leading to that pivotal moment, the birth of the Dominion of Canada. And from there, we'll see how that new country grew, forged a modern identity, and what its future might just hold. So, where does the story of Canada really begin? Well, let me tell you, it starts thousands and thousands of years before a single European ship ever saw its shores. It begins with the indigenous nations who first called this land home. Let's take a look at how that ancient foundation met the ambitions of the newcomers from across the sea. Just look at the incredible scale of time we're talking about here. The story doesn't start with ships in the 1500s. It starts something like 16,000 years ago, as these giant ice sheets melted and the first people moved south from Beringia. Over millennia, they developed these complex, sophisticated societies perfectly adapted to their environments. And get this, the first European contact wasn't Columbus. It was Norse explorers, Vikings, who built a small settlement right there in Newfoundland around the year 1000. So fast forward to the 15th and 16th centuries, and the two major European powers show up with totally different game plans. On one hand, you had the French. Starting with Jacques Cartier in 1534, they were all about the super lucrative fur trade. That meant they had to build alliances and trading networks with First Nations. On the other hand, the British were much more focused on setting up permanent farming settlements, claiming land, and basically transplanting their whole way of life. You just knew these two competing visions for North America were on a collision course. And collide they did. Big time. The 17th and 18th centuries were basically defined by this massive struggle between France and Britain for control of North America. And this wasn't just some local squabble. This was a global power struggle, and the winner would decide the fate of an entire continent. By the 1750s, the fate of the continent really came down to a simple, brutal ratio. 10-1. Yep. For every one person living in New France, there were 10 people living in the British colonies just to the south. That population difference was a huge weakness. It meant the British could raise bigger armies, fight longer campaigns, and, in the end, just overwhelm the French with sheer numbers. The whole thing came to a head during the 7 Years' War, which you might know as the French and Indian War. The absolute turning point happened in 1759. In this incredibly daring and bloody battle on the Plains of Abraham, right outside Quebec City, the British managed to defeat the French. Both commanding generals actually died in the fight, but the outcome was crystal clear. The heart of New France had fallen. The war officially wrapped up with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. France gave up almost everything it had on mainland North America. And this part is fascinating because it shows you exactly what they valued back then. Britain actually returned the incredibly profitable sugar island of Guadeloupe to France because, just as Voltaire had pointed out, it was considered way more valuable than the huge cold territory of Canada. The French Empire in North America was, for all intents and purposes, over. All right, so with the British now firmly in control, the story shifts. It zooms in on the colonies themselves. For about 100 years, they all kind of did their own thing, until a really unique set of pressures forced them to consider a pretty radical idea. What if we united into a single country? This is the narrowest, most critical point of our hourglass. So what was pushing them? Well, a few big things. First, there was the giant to the south. The United States was fresh out of its Civil War and was looking pretty expansionist. That fear played a huge role in shaping Canada. Second, the colonies desperately needed a railway to connect them all. And third, the biggest colony was just stuck in political gridlock, unable to get anything done. The solution to all of it? Confederation. And you know what? They moved surprisingly fast. They held a series of conferences in Charlottetown, then Quebec City, and finally in London to hammer out all the details. These fathers of confederation came up with a new kind of country, a federal dominion, a self-governing nation inside the British Empire. And then, boom! On July 1st, 1867, the British North America Act came into force and the Dominion of Canada was officially a thing. But creating the Dominion was really just the beginning. Now, this new, pretty small country had to actually grow into the massive territory it claimed and start finding its own voice on the world stage. This next phase is all about expansion, sacrifice, and the slow, steady march toward real independence. Using the promise of a transcontinental railway as a powerful lure, the new government got to work expanding. In 1870, it acquired the massive territory of Rupert's Land. British Columbia joined, then PEI. The prairie provinces were carved out to get people to settle there. And finally, all the way in 1949, Newfoundland and Labrador joined, completing that vision of a country that stretched from sea to sea. But nationhood wasn't just built with railways and land deals. It was forged in the fires of war. Canada's contribution to the First and Second World Wars was absolutely immense, and that incredible sacrifice created this powerful, unique sense of Canadian identity. For the first time, soldiers felt like they were fighting and dying not just for the British Empire, but for Canada. Big victories, like the one at Vimy Ridge in World War I, were seen as these defining moments, proof that Canada had finally come of age. And that new sense of identity pretty quickly got reflected in the law. The Statute of Westminster in 1931 was a massive step. It basically said, okay, Canada and the other British dominions are now fully independent states, equals with Britain. While some ties remained, this was the moment Canada officially got the keys to its own car, controlling its own foreign policy and its own destiny. Okay, so fast forward past World War II. In the decades that followed, Canada's journey of self-definition just kept going. The country started grappling with new social questions, it redefined its relationship with its founding cultures, and it took on a whole new role on the world stage. This is the story of modern Canada. You can really see modern Canada taking shape in a few powerful moments. In 1965, the country finally got its own distinctive flag, the maple leaf. Then, in 1982, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau patriated the Constitution. He basically brought it home, severing the final legislative tie to Britain, and he added the powerful Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And in 2005, Canada continued down that path as a social pioneer, becoming one of the first countries in the world to legalize same-sex marriage nationwide. A really defining choice for modern Canada was how to handle its cultural identity. Instead of the American melting pot idea, where everyone blends together, the Trudeau government in the 70s made multiculturalism official policy. The idea was to create a cultural mosaic, where immigrants could become fully Canadian without having to give up their own heritage. And that policy has had a profound effect on modern Canadian society. But this period was also defined by deep, deep internal division. The central tension has always been about Quebec's place within Canada. This question literally boiled over in two separate referendums on independence. Now, while the no side won both times, that 1995 vote was unbelievably close. Razor thin. It showed just how fragile Canadian unity could be and proved that the very nature of the country is something that's always up for debate. So, here we are, full circle, from Voltaire's A Few Acres of Snow to a G7 nation known around the world for its multiculturalism and vast natural resources. Canada's history hasn't been a straight line at all. It's been a constant process of negotiation between peoples, between regions, and between big ideas, which really leaves us with the big question: what will the next chapter of that negotiation look like? Hey, if you enjoyed this quick history of Canada, make sure to check out our playlist for more quick country histories.